Good morning, metalheads, and welcome to another edition of Metal Sanctuary. This time, I'm going to be doing a top 5 bands with less than 5 albums. Now, the reason I chose this is mostly to get into bands that were older, maybe getting their start in like the late 70s or the 80s, and then for whatever reason ended up stopping to just wasn't enough record sales, or maybe death of a band member, or whatever. Not focusing on any of the newer bands, because a lot of those would have less than 5 records. But this one is more generated towards the older bands. Usually with any top list I do, there's going to be some honorable mentions, so I've got 3 of those. The first of which is Toxic, which is an 80s speed metal band. They released just 2 albums, World Circus and Think This, and I think World Circus was the debut. Like I said, speed metal band from the 80s. The high-pitched vocals like early Anthrax. Not as much distortion in the in the guitars what thrash metal would have necessarily, which I think is what the main difference between speed metal and thrash metal is. Speed metal does have a lot of the melody and the technicality that thrash metal has, not as much of the distortion, and usually the speed metal bands would have more of a high-pitched vocal or a cleaner vocal than what the thrash bands would have. Crimson Glory, 4 albums. This is a band also from the 80s, more of like a progressive metal band. Their original singer, Midnight, passed away. Another one of their former singers is now the singer for Queensryche, Todd La Torre. Like I said, they released 4 records, and they are more along the lines of like a progressive metal band. Grim Reaper from the UK, 3 albums. More of coming out a little bit past the new wave of British heavy metal, but still maintaining more of kind of like a classic metal sound. Had a lot of a American metal feel to it, so it didn't sound like the Judas Priest or the Iron Maidens or the Saxons or Ravens or anything like that. They had more of a kind of almost like an Armored Saint-ish type feel to them. And then Sanctuary, who is currently back together and working on what is to be their 4th studio album. They did 2 records in the early 80s, early to mid 80s, and then the band broke up. Some members wanted to go into a different direction. The record company wanted to go into a different direction, and a couple of the main members stayed back and formed what was to eventually become Nevermore. Warrell Dane, the lead singer from both bands, and they are currently working on their 4th record, which is going to be a prequel to the Refuge Denied album. It's going to be called Inception. So let's get into the top 5. At number 5, let's go with At the Gates. This is the band that was at the very forefront of the Swedish death metal movement. And in particular, their album Slaughter of the Soul, which introduced a lot more simplistic styling of music. They had really a lot going on in the first 3 records, as far as just a lot of kind of progressive thrash kind of almost, and they introduced a little bit more of some more melody and kind of stripped down some things, and didn't get to where they had like so many different changes in all the songs. At number 4, the band Slaughter, a Canadian band, not to be confused with the American glam band Slaughter. They released just 1 record, and they were at the forefront of the Canadian thrash movement. Their lone album was Strappado, and it's a very, very good record. And I wanted to put them in my in my top list for underrated, which I have will be coming out pretty soon. But with only one record, it was kind of hard for me to put them in there, so I felt they were best suited for the less than 5 category. At number 3, Carnivore, which was Peter Steele's first band. They released 2 records under that name, and then what eventually happened was the rest of the band members decided to quit. Peter Steele was retained to stay on the contract, and he decided to form a new band under the name Type O Negative. And their first record a lot of people would think would be kind of closely tied into Carnivore. It's got a lot of those sounds with the hardcore and the thrash elements mixed in, but the songs are a lot longer. Like I said, they released 2 records, Carnivore and Retaliation. And then the first Type O Negative record, a lot of people consider kind of like to be the third Carnivore record. But like I said, going into a change in some of those songs, with the songs being 8-9 minutes long, and then introducing what would eventually be the more typical Type O Negative sound with the slower thing and the goth type thing. Number 2, Possessed. 2 full-length albums and 1 EP was all this band produced. The original lead singer is kind of in the works of making a new record. This band comes out around about the same time as Death. Their first record, 7 Churches, being the kind of like the proto-death metal style that would eventually come in the late 80s, early 90s. And then their second album, Beyond the Gates, was more of a kind of going back down to more of a thrash, but still kind of having some of those same death metal undertones. And number 1 for top 5 with less than 5 albums is the band Violence, which was a band out of the Bay Area, San Francisco. They released 3 full-length albums and 1 EP. The guitarist can't even think of his name right offhand. The one that started Machine Head. Anyway, they had 3 records and an EP, and then there's a story where the singer from Machine Head said that he had started some kind of fight with some black people in the area. They knew what band he was in, so he pretty much just left and decided to make a new band because they knew where he would be playing and hanging out. So anyway, those are my top 5 for bands with less than 5 albums. I'd like to see what your list would be. Like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends. Also, I still only have 1 question for my Ask Me Anything episode, so I'd like to have some more of those, and maybe hopefully I can get that one out soon. Stay metal and God bless.